This podcast is sponsored by Insurity. Insurity are a national specialist insurance broker focusing on property insurance within the leasehold and private rental sectors. Their clients are central to all that they do, and they strive to raise awareness of changing insurance needs within the property sector. As partner to the Property Institute, Insurity continue to work closely with the Property Institute and its members in order to drive the property industry forward.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Four Walls, where I explore the stories and insights of remarkable individuals who are shaping the future of our industry. Today, I'm thrilled to have Shaunna Thornton as our guest, a trailblazer in the world of risk and compliance within the property management sector. Shaunna has carved out a distinguished career by breaking barriers in what is often considered a very male-dominated field. Her journey is marked by pivotal milestones and invaluable lessons learned along the way, making her an inspiration for aspiring professionals. And with a keen eye on industry trends and an unwavering commitment to excellence, Shaunna is not only a leader but also a mentor to many. Her expertise extends to understanding and navigating complex changes in legislation, like the Building Safety Act, and she is at the forefront of embracing new technologies and trends in risk management. And as she shares her insights, we'll delve into the challenges property managers face today and how they can effectively address them. And with her passion and dedication, Shaunna is not just shaping the present, but also paving the way for future generations. Whether you're in the industry or simply curious about the dynamic world of property management, Shaunna's story promises to be both informative and inspiring. Thank you, Shaunna. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Jodie. I'm delighted to come on the podcast. I've kind of listened, as we've briefly said before, kind of when we met at the TPI events. I've listened to a number of your episodes, with different guests. So yeah, I'm honoured to be invited along.
If we just start based on your career journey to start with, that's okay. What inspired you to pursue a career in risk and compliance? And it's not really something that you get talked about in school or, anything like that. It is, and specifically in our sector, where did you see yourself going with that?
I suppose if you asked me, 15 years ago, I don't know if I would have ended up maybe within the property management industry. So I went to college in Ireland and I studied environmental health and safety. So it was something I kind of knew I wanted to become involved with. In Ireland at the time, large amount of kind of new builds construction. So that was sort of where I originally foresaw that I would potentially end up. And then just sort of an idea came to me that maybe I needed to move to London or England to try and broaden my horizons a little bit. And my background is consultancy, but predominantly more mixed environment, commercial, retail, supported living. And I done that for a number of years. And I arrived in ARK Workplace Risk about 5.5 years ago now. And ARK predominantly work within the built environment, supporting developers, owners, and obviously managing agents, property managers. So it was when I arrived within ARK that I suppose I was thrust upon the property management industry, and I became aware very quickly that it was a different type of consultancy that I've maybe been exposed to before in the past, dealing with high-rise, complex, contentious buildings, but also supporting property managers, facility managers, estate teams daily with some of the queries, issues that they might face. So really, really different for me, very exciting. And I suppose over the last 5.5 years, have learned a huge amount. I know from, the industries with anybody within fire safety, health and safety, you think you kind of know it all, but really actually, once I arrived within ARK, I realised I knew very, very little because the industry is so complex, legislation is so fast moving, and there's so much pressure placed on property managers, managing agents, and obviously the Building Safety Act, as I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, has brought that new complexity to our environment. So incredibly challenging, but an incredibly rewarding experience as well over the last number of years.
Definitely. And I suppose even though you say you did your degree, all those years ago, God, I made you sound really old then, didn't I? So I did it all of those years ago. You came into, like you say, you're talking about high rise and that sort of thing. You came into it post Grenfell. So how did you find that learning curve of, what was before Grenfell and what was after Grenfell? How did you find navigating all of that?
Yeah, for me, as I said, I predominantly was coming from more supported living, commercial retail aspect into an industry that was incredibly exposed, I think, kind of
And at
post.
crisis point in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think I was, personally really quite shocked, I suppose, at what was happening within the industry. I think within ARK, we're incredibly lucky to work with very good clients, managing agents, developers, owners, RMCs and right to manage, whereas we were also working within an industry where maybe not everybody was working to the same standard
Mm,
and craftsmanship. And when our clients would take over a building or they would purchase a suite of buildings, maybe from another developer, owner, or even managing agent, I was quite surprised, I think, at how poor the maintenance, the management would be within that building, and how
mm,
little information was available on the history of that building.
yeah.
So even from maybe an older, building that might be 1920s, 1800s, 1960s to maybe new builds at that time, there was still that huge gap of actually Regulation 38 information. And now obviously we talk about the safety case for buildings over 80 meters and that golden thread. So I think that's what surprised me the most.
Mm,
Obviously Grenfell was such a shock at the time, but it exposed and put the spotlight on the industry of actually where those gaps would be. And
mm,
obviously we're just off the back now of the Grenfell Phase 2 report, which outlines again those further industry gaps that we had with regards to maybe within the LFB, but also actually the maintenance, the management of those buildings, and actually the type of competent persons that were being selected in order to work on those buildings. And I think competency is going to be a huge thing for our industry moving forward. Are you selecting the correct persons and
mm.
companies to actually do the work for you, as PAP or owner, developer, and managing agent?
It's such a shame, isn't it, that Grenfell had to happen in order to achieve what we're achieving now. And all those people had to, lose their lives and everything just to get to the point where we should have been in the first place. It's just
Yeah.
horrific, really, to think of it that way.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate that a tragedy of that type, and obviously we had Lacknell House before, so these kind of
Mm,
things were on the radar. But I believe, at the time, it's unfortunate matters that have now led to this situation. And I think we've a long way to go. I don't think the industry is where it needs to be at the moment. I think obviously the Building Safety Act has placed a different type of accountability now on owners, and developers have brought them more to the foreground, whereas previously before that it might have been the managing agent that was having to answer for a lot of this. Whereas now,
mm.
if you are owner, or in the eyes of the building safety regulator as PAP, you have an accountability there. So it doesn't just fall now to the managing agent. It's actually you as the principal accountable person for those
Yeah.
buildings, or number of buildings in scope.
Yeah, which is great, really. Going back as well to, what inspired you to pursue a career, did it put you off the fact that it was quite male dominated, or did you see that as a challenge, or did you just not think, oh, it doesn't matter to me, whatever, doesn't
Yeah.
matter?
It's really interesting because I think I don't know if it's just the property management, fire safety, consultancy industry that is male dominated. But I think the type of industry that I have worked in for over the last 12 years just happens to be a male dominated industry.
Mm,
I've never looked at being underestimated as a weakness, but most of all as an advantage, really.
hmm
I've been very lucky, I think, throughout my career that I've always had really good mentors. I've always worked with really good colleagues that have supported me throughout my career. But I've also had an incredibly strong mother who always had a great work ethic and never sort of put that boundary in front of me, where it was that just because you're a woman, you can't do that. And I get quite excited by maybe being somebody in the room that is perceived as knowing the least. I've had
Yeah.
occasions, particularly over the last sort of 5.5 years, where, I'm a woman in a room, that I might be the only woman in the room on those meetings as well. And it can be perceived and presumed that either, I'm the more junior person because I'm the woman, or I'm maybe there to take the notes.
Take the notes. Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, and they get quite surprised when I say, no, I'm actually, I'm a director of risk and compliance, and that sort of sets the tone. But I think if you know the subject, if you're confident in your abilities and you don't allow those type of barriers to hold you back, you're absolutely, you should have your seat at the table. And I manage, a group of predominantly women, actually, not by choice, more by chance. And one of the things I'm always trying to instill within my team as a whole is you have to put yourself in situations where maybe you do feel a little bit uncomfortable or it's beyond your current means, because I think that's the easiest way to learn, is actually, challenge yourself. So yeah, I always really enjoy those kind of challenges. I love walking into a room, them presuming I'm, as we said, there to take the notes, and coming out and actually them seeing me as their peer. I get really excited by that.
Well, I've seen you speak a few times on the regionals and in other places, and I think you're incredible. And it's great to see that they are promoting more women, if you like, to do these talks, rather than it feeling to the outside world that it is just men who deal with this. And they don't get me wrong, you've got Sean Lundy, who's incredible at what he does. I'd love him to come on the podcast if he's listening. But
I'm
yeah,
sure he will.
well, he did say he would. We just haven't had the chance to, sort out dates. But, at the same time, it's also great to see you up there and flying the flag for women and being incredible at what you do at the same time. So, congratulations for that.
Thank you, Julia. I have to say, I really think that's a huge part of that, and sort of my development over the last number of years has been for working with a company like ARK, in all honesty. When I joined those 5.5 years ago, it was never about, your gender. It was about being promoted on your merit and your capability, and honing in on people's skill sets. And not everybody enjoys presenting, not everybody enjoys, talking about topics, whereas I've always enjoyed it. And in a previous life, I used to do health and safety and fire safety training. So that sort of skill set kind of came naturally to me. And within ARK, it was that they saw that very early on within me and pushed me to try and reach higher limits. And I love being able to work for a company where it's not about, just because you might be well known. David Hills is one of our senior technical directors, incredibly well known within the industry. And we're very lucky to have somebody like him, and be able to learn from somebody like him within the industry. But in ARK, it's about utilizing all of the talent that we have. And yeah, I love being able to work for a company of that type, really.
Well, that's great. And it's great to hear you say that, because, sometimes you're working for a company and you just don't feel valued. And I've had it in the past, and I'm sure you have potentially in previous career choices and everything. But it's nice to hear that you feel so settled, and the fact that they saw that you were so good at, they saw that the presenting skills in you. And, as I said, I've seen you present, and I think you do a really great job. So in terms of, I guess, pivotal moments in your career over the past 5.5, 6 years, as you say, how has that shaped your journey and expertise, do you think?
It's a really difficult question, because I can't think of one moment in time that has probably shaped the last number of years. Obviously, I've been a consultant for over 12 years, but I really think I sort of found my calling once I joined ARK, because of the type of industries and the type of clients that we work with. It was so different, and such a different type of consultancy, where typically I was working with the client. I would do, fire risk assessments, general risk assessments, and I might not see them from one year to the next, where within ARK, we work strategically with our clients, whether they're developers, owners, or managing agents. So being able to work alongside those clients, to be able to see the real change that we can actually make within that. First and foremost for us, obviously, typically the buildings that we're working with, I kind of mentioned before, are complex and contentious, but there's people living within those buildings. So for us, every kind of decision that we make within ARK, every piece of advice that we provide to our clients, we have that in the back of our minds all the time. It's the people living in those buildings that are our first, responsibility with every decision we make. And that's throughout ARK. That's with our consultants, our operational teams, and obviously, the team that I manage. And I joined ARK, and very quickly, within 3 years, I was promoted to Director of Risk and Compliance, which is such a huge trajectory over such a short period of time. And I feel that trajectory was based on working with the clients that we have, but also the people that we have within the business as well, being able to share knowledge, share expertise, having a group of fellow directors and people within the industry that are well known to look towards, to say, that's somebody that I would like to be like one day, and to be able to develop those skills through CPD sessions, experiencing and working firsthand with these people, allows us then to obviously provide that sort of change to our clients as well. So yeah, not one moment. It's really difficult, I think, to pick one moment, but I think just the course of the clients and the people I work with, who are incredible in their own fields, has allowed those sort of moments to kind of come to what I'm doing now, really.
Brilliant. Well, that leads me on quite nicely actually to my next question, which is around role models. So do you have any role models to start with, or mentors who have helped guide your career path? Ultimately, what advice did they give you that still resonates with you today?
Yeah, I've been incredibly lucky in my career, I have to say. I think throughout the number of companies that I've worked with, there's always been really good people that I've learned a lot from. I think my personality and my fight to probably progress and move to the top of any business probably comes originally from my mother. I know I've probably mentioned her before, but she
Yeah.
had such a very clear outlook in her own life and her own business, very different from health and safety. But she had such an intense work ethic and never, I suppose, saw boundaries within
Mhm.
her own industry. And I sort of fed off that very much at a young age, that nothing is out of reach. You can achieve anything if you want to. And then as I've worked throughout my career, there has been, really good mentors that I've learned a lot from. But I would say, within ARK, our CEO is a woman, our COO is a woman as well. So looking at those and their positions of where they've kind of fit within our business, and kind of
Mhm.
listening to their history throughout the years, has allowed me to grow. And I think if you can build trust within a business, if you can be challenged within a business, but you also promote within as well.
Mm.
We have one of our kind of new managing directors, Peter Clark, who you will know from being on
Yeah.
the circuit as well. Peter started off, as a lead senior consultant in ARC nearly 6 years ago, and from working throughout the business is now our managing director. So I think it shows the true kind of core value within any business if you promote within. So I think, working with people like that has been incredible.
Oh, that's brilliant. Going to switch it up a little bit now and ask about impact of legislation, if you don't mind. How have changes in regulations such as the Building Safety Act impacted the way you think property managers approach compliance?
I think it's changed things incredibly over the last 18 months. Property managers have always been what we would say, and I'm sure that, any property managers that are listening would say you're time poor.
Hmm.
I think that's always the way that we've looked at things, and any solutions that we always try to provide our clients or the property managers or the estate teams that we work with. We try and give them solutions that's easy, but also ensures their compliance and that they're legislatively compliant, because they are time poor trying to manage the day-to-day maintenance and
Hmm.
management within a building, service charge, resident engagement. And now we have, obviously, as we've mentioned, the Building Safety Act, which brings a huge layer of complexity on top of the day-to-day management of buildings. I think one of the things that we see, which is is a struggle for property managers and managing agents, especially if you're working with right to manage or MCs, is the accountability that now comes along with the Building Safety Act. I think certain companies, right to manage and RMC, struggle with actually that accountability, and
Hmm.
they feel that that accountability should still sit with the property manager and the managing agent. And there is a huge education piece, I think, that still needs to sit around accountability and what comes along with buildings. If you are a director of an RMC and you are within a building that's over 18 meters, what does it mean to actually be a principal accountable person? You can't pass that to the managing agent or a consultancy company like ARK that sits with you. So, it's incredibly complex. And there's, certain issues now with trying to get funding for a lot of this that just doesn't exist within service charge budgets. So, yeah, it's not an easy time, I think, to be within the property management industry. I think the essence of what the Building Safety Act is all about is positive, and it's where we should be going. But the question I suppose we get asked all the time is, are property managers expected to now become health and safety and fire safety managers? Where does the competency level
Mm.
stop? How much should a property manager know when actually they're just trying to do, the day-to-day ins and outs of what the core property management is? If you have these more complex buildings, how much legislation are they expected to know about? And I think
Yeah.
that's a huge problem in itself, really.
Yeah, definitely. And from a property manager's perspective, I'm so grateful that there are companies out there like ARK who we can go to. And I think the biggest thing for property managers, you're not going to know everything. It's impossible to know everything. Doctors don't even know everything when it comes to, you specialize in a certain area as an example. And I think it's really important for a property manager if you don't know something, that it's important to say that, I'm not comfortable, or, this isn't an area that I'm an expert in, but I do know of X company who will be able to help you with this. And going back to the education piece, I think it's important that people realize that this information is, well, one could save your life because you've got to get the right things in place to protect you within your building. But also, you work really hard. We all work really hard to know this stuff. So we should be paid adequately for that. So it's as you said, building things into budgets that, have to be there in order to get this expert opinion. And, I'm sure if I had a question, for example, and it took you 5 minutes, that's one thing, and you could probably just answer it we could have a cup of tea at an event or something like that. But, these things are really in depth.
Mm.
And it's really important, I think, as you say, from an education point of view, to make sure that people know how much work goes into the advice that you can give and the work that you're putting into the industry. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jodie. And aligning yourself with consultancy companies, like ARC, incredibly important. But I think there's lots of information and educational information that's free out there as well.
Mm,
I would always say to anybody starting out within the sort of built environment property management industry, get to networking events. I know not everybody likes networking, but there's huge amount of information that can be shared there. Aligning yourself with the likes of ARL, BPF, the TPI, aligning yourself with these sort of industry bodies,
mm.
incredibly important, because even I know the Property Institute have the Building Safety Hub, huge amount of fact sheets, training
Yeah.
available. That's
So helpful,
so
really
helpful.
helpful. Mm,
And we have information online. We do training with our clients, obviously, but sometimes the property manager is having to relay that information to their clients and they might not be believed. I mean, more
mm.
often than not, we have property managers where, particularly, I think RMCs and or RTMs, they don't believe what the managing agent is saying. They think they're just trying to scam them
Yeah,
out of more money and increase the service charge because it's going to them versus actually back into the building. So being able to pinpoint them and show them these kind of websites to say, well, read it for yourself. This
yeah.
this is legislation. You have to do this, and you're accountable if
Mm.
it's not done.
And in terms of I guess, emerging trends or technologies and that sort of thing, property managers should be paying attention to? Is that something that you can speak on, or?
You know more than I do. This industry has changed so much over the last sort of 18 months when it comes to property management, building safety, and obviously the Building Safety Act. I really think, leveraging technology is incredibly important when it comes to managing buildings safely. I know we done a webinar a few months ago based on leveraging technology in the built environment, and we were quite surprised with the number of managing agents who had joined the call that were still not managing their buildings using a software platform. They were
Hmm.
still using document base or SharePoint. I think if you've got a building that's over 18 meters and you have to prove to the principal accountable person that you are managing their building safely, because now they have to be asking the managing agents this question. It's a lot easier to be able to have that safety case or that golden thread online with the document history. It stores not only your structural information, but your Regulation 38 information. And the PAP can log in themselves to actually, see this information. So I think that's one thing I'd be, I think in a few years' time, I'd be very surprised if anybody, there might be one or two, but I'd be very surprised if there was any managing agents or those managing buildings that were not leveraging technology in order to support that. I see that's the only way kind of really forward with things.
Yeah,
I-
it's definitely the future. And I suppose for the smaller businesses who maybe don't manage high rise or above 11 meters or have the complexity around that, I can understand why they would remain on a SharePoint basis initially, because you're balancing that cost, that outlay of the cost in order to put that software in with, well, I can't really charge my clients, or I can't justify my management fee in order to bring that in because my clients don't need X, Y, and Z because they're not high rise or they're not this or they're not that. So it's going to be a huge balancing act. But I have said to my clients particularly, it might just be high rise or above 11 meters at the moment, but it's not going to stop there. Eventually, it's going to be across the board, and we need to be prepared for that. So let's act appropriately and make sure that we've got everything in place. But from a software perspective, I do see the balance is needed still at the moment, I
yeah,
guess.
I agree. I think, I suppose technology is only one part of it. I think competency is going to be a huge thing within our
Mm.
industry. More often than not, we hear the race to the bottom, where again it sort of comes back to what you've just mentioned, Jodie, about it's that fine balancing act of, do we have the budget within the service charge to actually get all of the work done that maybe this particular building requires, where
Mm.
you're trying to do the day-to-day maintenance and management, but obviously you've all this emerging legislation that requires you to apply this to a building as well.
Hmm.
I think selecting the correct competent persons to do the work is going to be huge,
Yeah.
moving forward. Selecting somebody based on price should not be the case anymore. And I think that should apply across the board, not just for buildings that are over 18 meters. It's around, do they have the correct skill sets? Do they have the correct insurance to support
Hmm.
you as well? I think that's incredibly important. And even, as we mentioned before, off the back of the Grenfell phase two, one of the things that was highlighted very clearly was the competencies around the fire risk assessor that was working
Mm.
on Grenfell Tower. I think having a competency register, ensuring that assessors are suitable, have the correct skills, education, in behavioral attitudes as well, in order to actually work on those buildings, will be something, we can see moving forward. Do you have the correct, are you suitable to actually work on those buildings?
There's a huge emphasis, I think, certainly for me on the qualifications around property managers, but as you say, across the board as well. I think I had a conversation with a client whose mate down the pub is going to do their PAT testing. I felt like it was going to start bringing me out in hives, like, because that, like, you need to listen to what I'm saying. This isn't acceptable. but they were like, well, the legislation says, I'm like, head in my hands kind of thing. So, yeah, quite frustrating. But in terms then of the impact that you would like to have on the industry, do you have any particular goals for yourself or for the company, or just ultimately the impact you would like to have moving forward? Like think of the next 5 years, maybe.
Yeah, I think for us, we just want to continue supporting our clients as we already do, in all honesty. I think we want to, be seen as, and we are, as thought leaders within the industry. We're always sort of trailblazing when it comes to emerging legislation, emerging technology. So having our clients on board and being able to ensure that they are compliant, that they're aware of all of the changes and the complexities associated, with the current environment of not
Mm.
only building safety, but fire safety, general health and safety. So incredibly important, I think, on that part. We'll obviously want to, be supporting the likes of the TPI and ARL and BPF, who we're already, partners with, and hopefully continue on that journey. And then for myself, I think we want to try, and for me anyway, personally, is to get more within, mentoring programs and things like that, more
Nice.
for women within, and men within business, but more looking at, progression, career goals. How can we develop you not only internally within ARK, but maybe people within in the property management industry? I know I've mentioned it, but I think mentoring and networking is incredibly important within our industry, sharing the knowledge. It can be sometimes a little bit of a strange industry, I find, property management, where everybody's keeps things very close to their chest. They don't want to share the information. They feel, it should be within one business, or it should be within one organization, where I'm completely, let's all work together. Let's work on
Absolutely.
forums together. Let's share how much something costs. Let's share, templates, and work together as one industry, because I think that's the only way that everybody will be able to achieve the requirements
Mm.
of the Building Safety Act, which obviously apply to over 18, but as you rightly said, we think and we know that will eventually fall. So I think
Mm.
sharing knowledge is going to be, for me, it really important.
And what motivates you every day in your job, and how do you stay passionate about what you do?
Really quite easy to remain passionate, I think, when you work within this type of industry. As I mentioned, first and foremost, we work in buildings where people's lives are at stake. They live within these buildings. So, working to a certain standard, providing suitable, accurate advice to our clients is incredibly important. And it's so varied what we deal with all the time. I love that. And I think that really motivates me. We work with owners of buildings, we work with managing agents of buildings. Everybody has different needs and requirements depending on the complexity of their buildings. We might be working with the likes of the TPI, but I could be on site with the fire service because there has been a notice issued on a building, and we've been called in to support that particular client in having the notice lifted, and to ensure that, people are safe, but also to give that assurity to the fire service that actually our client is working with a suitable consultant
Mm.
company. And then it might be, providing training to our clients as well. So again, really varied. It could be on emerging legislation. It could be on really specific procedures that they need. So really quite easy from that aspect to keep
Mm.
motivated. Obviously, I manage a team as well, and they require a similar sort of motivation, because we really do want to make a difference with the companies
Yeah.
that we work with. It's not transactional. We see ourselves as one foot within our client, and one foot within ARC, so we become that strategic partner. So it can be really exciting because we can really, really make a difference within a business.
Mm. Oh, I love that. And I've written a human element here for you. So what does empathy and understanding play in like your everyday job and what you do, and particularly when working with various teams and clients, because empathy is a huge thing for me, and I think it needs to see a lot more of it in block management. particularly, I always say, there's a person, as you said earlier, this is somebody's home, and there's a person at the end of that service charge demand, or that service charge budget, which we need to make sure that you have that human element side of it. So if you can talk on that a little bit, that would be
Yeah.
great.
I think our success within ARK, and me personally, is measured by empathy. Any client property manager that we talk through, we like to and talk with, we like to think about, can we walk in your shoes? We really want to listen and understand the issues that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. We're not, and I'm not that type of manager, and we're not that type of company that are here to tell you what you need to do. It's about understanding the issues, the problems that you're facing on a day-to-day basis, and offering that end-to-end solution. I mean, it's incredibly pressurized, this industry that we're working in. And I think anybody would be foolish to say that it's not, because of the expectations that are placed not only by the industry, by the regulations, by clients, but also by the pressure that comes by, seems to be at the moment, the likes of the social media and the media's interest now on the industry. So I think having an ear to lean to empathy, and as I said, I think our success and my success within ARK is measured by having empathy, because we really want to know what the issues are and to be able to provide those end-to-end solutions. Not everything is the same, not every building is the same, not every problem is the same. So it's about being adaptable and being able to fit into what your client actually needs, and providing, a really thought solution to an issue. I think it's incredibly important. I think it goes with everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. I imagine from a property management side, dealing with very different, issues on a day-to-day basis. So it's being able to provide that support really I think is incredibly important for us.
Yeah, definitely. And you've hit the nail on the head there. Every building is different. Every board of directors is different for an RMC, etc. Every lease is different. And especially when it comes down to, I deal with a lot of listed buildings because I'm in the Cotswolds. So, trying to get anything done on a listed building is like pulling teeth. Not that I want to change anything on these beautiful buildings, but sometimes you have to, especially when regulation comes in or legislation changes and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. But also on the flip side, that the people that you're trying to help have an empathy for you as the professional and compassion for you, that you're trying to, I think at one point, if every seminar or conference or something I went to, the legislation had changed, and those conferences were only, maybe 2 months apart. And there's legislation, something different had happened, and thank goodness for like Cassandra Zanelli, I think know who was keeping on top of all of that. It's yeah, quite a tricky one, but I think it's just, as you say, it's having that empathy and understanding across the board for each other, and just that human element of trying to, let's all just try and help each other. We're all trying to get to the same goal. It's not competition. And as I said earlier, at the end of the day, it's people's lives that we need to try and do all of this for. So, but can you talk to me a little bit about common misconceptions? So I ask a lot of my guests this questions, particularly those who work in the property management industry. Common misconceptions of either what you do or the industry as a whole. Let me know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, really interesting question, I think, Miss. I think sometimes when it comes to working for a consultancy like ARK, people can think you're just in it for the money. I really think that, and look, there probably is certain consultancy companies out there that do want to kind of make hay when the sun shines, but within a company like ARK and the values that we work towards on a daily basis. I know one of our core values internally is trustworthy. That's one of we've got five, and one of them is being trustworthy. And it's about delivering the facts, however uncomfortable, but also working strategically with our clients. And that will be about ensuring that they get the correct solutions at the right price, obviously, but for us,
Hmm.
first and foremost, it's, are the buildings safe and are
Hmm.
you compliant within the industry? And I think that's one of the big things that we can see. I know from even kind of attending, different networking events, people can be really, nervous about using, I think, kind of companies like ARK because maybe they've been burnt before or they've been let down by a transactional company. But I think if you align yourself with the correct type of company, you can get
Hmm.
huge value out
Yeah.
of that. And I don't know if the regulators' words before Christmas, where they were talking about the price of things, probably helped, support
Hmm.
the industry in that way, because as you rightly said, we're all working to one common goal, which is to ensure that people are safe and everyone is compliant, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking on that in terms of, maybe success stories or a project you're particularly proud of, is there something that you've done that's made a real difference, or that something that springs to mind that you think, oh God, you know what, I'm so proud of what I achieved there? Or it doesn't have to be within like the company you're doing. It could be, 15 years ago when you're at
Mm.
uni or anything like that. Just let me know what you think.
I'm trying to think if there's one particular maybe story, but I just genuinely believe that success is measured in so many different ways. And I think we're very lucky, even currently at ARC, that we have continued success all the time with our clients. And it might be something incredibly small where, we've changed the opinion of a right to manage by supporting the managing agent to help them understand their, accountability when it comes to the Building Safety Act versus, having a notice maybe lifted off a building by the work that we're doing. So small in essence, but I think what that output of that is that we've built that trust with our
Hmm.
client, and they trust us with the lives of people living in their buildings. I think that's a huge success
Hmm.
for us, that we are the owners, the PAPs, not even, but the directors of those buildings believe that we are the right people for the jobs. I think that's a huge success for us, that we're trusted in that way.
And in turn, that they trust you as individuals as well, because you can companies, and I don't mean this towards you guys or anything like that, but you do see like companies saying, oh, we're this and with that. But actually, when you deal with some individuals, potentially you just think, are you?
Yeah.
That person doesn't seem to align with what the company is trying to achieve, which I guess is really difficult for the company structure, if you like. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think, from everything that I've seen of what you do and the work that you do, is trustworthy is definitely something that would spring to mind if
Mm.
if I was to recommend you or anything like that, and that's a big thing for me as well. Trust is a huge element of my personal values and my company's values as well. So,
Yeah, and people buy from people, don't they?
of
I mean,
course.
you can have as many core values and values within a company, but actually, do you believe what the people are saying to you, in the room? If you're coming to deliver some bad news or maybe news that somebody might not want to hear, do you truly believe that the person delivering it has your best interests at heart? That thing. And for me, on a personal level, I genuinely love the work that I do. I think we're
Hmm.
incredibly lucky with the clients that we have, and I've built some great relationships with them over the years. And they've taught me a lot as well, based on maybe their company structures, their values, the strategic type of KPIs that they work towards as well. But I just really love it. I love kind of working on a day-to-day basis with our clients, just even for general catch-ups, or it might be the big deliveries of big pieces of
Hmm.
legislation. But I think every piece of that, allows you then to build that partnership and build that trust. And one of my key things is I'm not just interested of talking to, the board of directors. It's about the people on the ground that are equally as important for me. So ensuring that estate teams, site teams, property managers have the same level of support as the board of directors. Obviously they're interested because it's the figures and it's the
Hmm.
finance and everything like that, but actually the people that sometimes have the hardest jobs are the people that are dealing with the leaseholders and the tenants on a day-to-day basis. So it's about offering that same level of support. And I get such a just a genuine reward from that,
Mm.
because that the work that you're doing is providing that support to them.
Last question, or last couple of questions, I'll probably sneak another one in. What advice would you give to women who were looking to, what advice would you give to women looking to enter or advance in the industry?
I would say take the chance, align yourself with a good employer. Choose your employer wisely. I think I've seen more often than not where not only women, but people have worked for poor companies in the industry, not just consultancy, but managing agents as well. And I think it can really set somebody's career back, especially if you're working in a toxic environment. I think if you're going through interview stage, try and find out what the culture is within a business. Try and understand, do they promote within? Do they care about developing and progressing their staff? I mentioned it before, but aligning yourself with industry bodies, network, get out there and try and understand the industry that we're working in. BPF do an incredible mentoring program as well. So I would say try and get aligned to that, because you can have one-on-one mentorship. And yeah, for me, I think, your career can really speed up if you get within the right company. If you asked me 5.5 years ago, would I be director in 3 years by joining ARK? Probably not. But I was just incredibly lucky with the people I worked with, and I really just loved the industry that I landed within, and it just made sense to me why we were getting up and going to work every day because of the type of buildings and people that we were working with. So yeah, I think that's incredibly important, selecting a good employer, good values, good employees that all work towards the same culture. I think that's incredibly important.
My very last question then is on your leadership style, because you mentioned earlier that you manage a team.
Yep.
How would you describe your leadership style, and how has it evolved? When you try and lead a team and you do so with, empathy and that sort of thing, which I'm sure you do. Describe how your leadership style what it is and how has it evolved?
I would hope the way I describe it, my team would probably describe it back to me in the same way. But I think being a leader is all about building trust. I think you will have various different types of personalities within a team. And I think that's incredibly important. Everybody has an individuality that you need to work with. I'm not one of these people that want everybody to change to suit my way of thinking. I think you should bring your individuality to work. Your autonomy is incredibly important for me. Anybody that I hire or bring within my team, I want them to work to their own merits. I want them to bring their own opinions to the table. And I think that allows you to bring that trust and build that trust with your team as well. But I hope that they would always know that I'm there to motivate them, and open communication, again, incredibly important for me. I'm a huge believer in kind of encouraging people to take the leap, put yourself in situations that you would find uncomfortable or probably give you that sort of, flutter in your belly, because I think that's how you learn the quickest, by pushing yourself and putting yourself in those situations. I've done the TPI regionals a few times now, but I remember the first time that I was going to kind of represent ARK, probably the youngest speaker there at the time, on a topic. I found incredibly, challenging, in all honesty. And I was incredibly nervous, but I was happy that first of all, ARK, trusted me with delivering the message, but that I was given that opportunity. And from that, I want to be able to provide that to my team as well, to provide that progression, and to try and push them to the greatness that I know that they can be at. So yeah, and it's all about building trust and listening, going back to what we said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And having that empathic ear, because somebody might have a very good day, they might have a very bad day, and it's about understanding where they currently are within their personal and their career, their working life as well, which is important too.
Before I let you go, is there anything that you would like to add
I'm just genuinely grateful for inviting me along. I think the work that you're doing within the podcast is incredibly important for the
Thank you.
industry. All of the different opinions that come from within property management, and as you rightly said, we're all working towards the same goals. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. And I'll put your contact details and everything in the show notes if people want to get in touch with ARK's website details as well. So thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jodie.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my latest podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links are in the show notes. Or you can contact me on jodie@jodiefraser.com. For more content and updates, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favourite platforms. Thank you once again for listening. Until next time, take care.